these classes because because I have some students that are not able to attend because one person's in Ukraine, another person had a medical emergency. She's back in the US. So I'm recording my classes for them. And so that's why I want to record these classes. That's why I brought my laptop. So I think I have enough power to use my laptop here. But like I said, we can't use the classroom computer because the classroom computer's been disassembled. So we have to do something a little bit different today. We're going to have our, well, actually not, it is different because we're going to have our first debate. And our first debate with in the class. So let me open up my folder for the class and open up the lesson plan. And you can see that our debater is, share the screen. Our debater is Gloria. We'll be debating on this topic. Gloria, you're pro, right? Okay, and I'm con on this topic. To South Koreans, the social sciences exist to assist social change. Hooray, social change. And social change is good, right? We love social change. So but before we do that, I need to talk about the final exam for this class, like I've talked about the other classes. So let me open up the final exam here and share the screen. And so we go to, let me make sure that you're able to see this. So we go to share screen. And here you see the, and it's, oh, sorry, I got to go here. I think you can see it. You can see the final exam. Participants can now see your application. Hooray. So it's the same format as the midterm. It's the same format as the midterm. And it is to asking you to use and cite specific information from at least 3 different chapters, from chapters 3 through 6 of Creswell and Poth, and chapters 13 and 20 from Trompenaars and Hampton Turner, to critique this statement. Explain and critique the relationship between culture and globalization. Are national cultural distinctions becoming less distinct due to globalization? So it's a very general, broad, provocative topic. And so you still, have to define your terms and what do you mean by culture? What do you mean by globalization? And of course, it's due Saturday, June 4th at 7 a.m. at Cyber Campus so that I can write comments on it and send it back to you. Should be no more than, 500 words, not including the footnotes and citations and everything. You should use and cite information from, as I said, chapters 3 through 6 of the Creswell and Poth textbook, and chapters 13 through 20 of the Trompenaars and Hampton Turner book. And, so the same format as the midterm, okay? So that is the topic for today. And since we have to do this through the computer, I'm going to try to stand up and do this because I think I capture more of your attention if I'm able to stand up and perform while standing. And then let's go back to the notes for today. So we go to the lesson plan, and you can see the lesson plan. And so we're looking at chapter 5 of the Creswell and Poth book. And so let's open up those notes in chapter 5. We go to chapter 5, and let me make sure you're able to see those notes. And okay, 5 different qualitative studies. So the book gives you examples of the different qualitative research methodologies or approaches that it is discussing in this textbook, and they're in the appendix for the book. And and you give an example of what these different studies look like. The first, Appendix B, is a narrative study, right? And it is a narrative study of a single Chinese immigrant student. And of course, you're doing narrative studies in your own work, of a single Chinese immigrant student by the name of Ali Mei Zhang. And she is participating in a Canadian middle school while she interacts with her family. So this is a real study. This has been published. This is an example of a scholarly qualitative research project employing a narrative approach. And it highlights the challenges she faces as being Chinese in school, but then when she goes home, she's uses her Fujian dialect Chinese language and speaking with her family. But when she goes to school, she speaks with the other students, and there are a lot of Chinese students in her school using Mandarin. So that she shifts among the kind of dialects that she uses in communicating with her family and her friends. And this impacts upon her identity. Like you can imagine, right? When you're at home, you speak Fujian dialect, the kind of dialect that's spoken in Taiwan. And then you go to school and you feel pressured not to use that dialect in speaking with other people. You feel that using the Fujian dialect is somehow wrong, that you feel inferior, that you're doing something bad. If you use the language your mom and dad use in speaking with you, if you use it back home at the school, what is that like? That's something I can't really tell you about. I've not experienced that. We don't hear much about Koreans speaking different dialects in the US, although I guess Koreans have a funny attitude towards the kind of dialect of Korean spoken on Jeju Island, right? That Jeju Island dialect is kind of funny. So maybe there is those cases in the United States with, or North America, including Canada, with Korean students, since there's so many Koreans that live abroad in Canada, Australia, US, that they actually do that as well, but not something that I've ever encountered. And in my experience, and that's kind of interesting. Appendix C is a phenomenological study about individuals who have experienced AIDS, right? AIDS, HIV had high stigma as a disease that people associated with a gay lifestyle wrongly, but that was how it was interpreted. It was a curse, and it's still embarrassing to a lot of people. And that, of course, always makes dealing with these diseases more of a challenge if you're a doctor and trying to motivate people to get treated and take precautions and talk to other people and other doctors about drugs and prophylactic devices that help you avoid getting AIDS if you're in fact gay or some other way by which to get the disease. Appendix D is a grounded theory study. We talked briefly about grounded theory, trying to make sense of how more conceptually your interviewees, the subjects of your study, how do they understand their own cause and effect conceptualization of their life to explain how they go about integrating physical fitness and fitness gym activities into their lifestyle, which again is something it's new, it's something different. With the history of segregation in the United States, I mean, I grew up in a very hostile small town. We moved to this small town in Ohio from a bigger town when I was 11 years old. And this town was very conservative, very hostile. There was somebody, I just learned a year ago, some professor did a study on what were called sundown towns. And there were these sundown towns, or these smaller towns throughout the United States that had signs up until the middle of the 20th century saying that Black people better not be in this town after sundown, that any Black person needs to be out, must not be in our town when the sun goes down. You can come into work if you have to, but do not be here after sundown. And they didn't use the word African American. You can imagine what word they used. And this was one of my towns. My town was one of those towns. And it's not like all the towns were that way. There were a number of them in Ohio. They were all about small towns, not too big, because you can't be a sundown town if you're New York City or Cleveland or Pittsburgh or Cincinnati, but these smaller towns. And mine was one of them. Yes. Yeah, but they came along with the other immigrants from Europe in the early part of the 20th century. So that's it. We could do an interesting study, a narrative study on me, because my father came to my small town, Canton, Ohio, named after Guangzhou, China, and a Cantonese dialect, because his grandfather and the grandfather's brothers had come to that area in the early part of the 20th century to work on the railroad when the railroad was working. So he had family history with that town, but not directly, through his grandfather. And then after World War II was over, they were poor. My grandfather had 4 children, and he told my father, as the oldest boy, the oldest child and the man, you are the one that has to leave, hermano, because you, hermano, must leave and go to America because we're too poor. You can't stay here. And my father always resented that. He wanted to stay in Italy. He wanted to stay with his sisters and brother, but he was pushed out by his dad. And my father died just a year and a half ago. And so he went to Stark County, Ohio, and his people from his village in Capitignano in Italy, they traditionally came to that area and settled there and supported each other. So people coming from Capitignano, the village in Italy where my father was from, they would go to America, someplace where they had people that could help them. And that meant where people had already settled. So that's why my father didn't go to Hollywood, didn't go to Florida, didn't go to New York City. He went to Stark County, Ohio. Why? Because we knew people there. And that's true with all diasporas and all immigration people. You will tend to go where you think you will have help. And that means people that come from the same town or village that your family comes from, because they will help you a little bit. And the priest helped my father, because Italians are all Catholics for the most part, and got my father a job working in construction, like Mexicans tend to dominate construction in the United States to do, or like they tend to here in Chinese and Asian immigrants tend to dominate here in Korea, because Americans don't want to do difficult, dirty, and dangerous jobs. Difficult, dirty, dangerous, DDD, including hard construction work. So he got a job in construction, and he got a job in a company where he could speak Italian. He didn't speak English. He just had a high school degree, and he didn't have to speak English yet because everybody spoke Italian at the job site. So it's an interesting case study for my father, but my father was still European. He was a good-looking white guy. He was a boxer. He looked like a movie star when he was young. He had reddish brown hair and greenish blue eyes. He was a really handsome looking guy, right? So he didn't face the same stigma that African Americans or Hispanic Americans with Indian brown complexion face. But it was a very racist town. I mean, it's known in my area that it's that way. That I'll tell you stories. Like, for example, maybe I can find you very briefly here, since we're on my computer here. This is my father's pizza shop that he set up to make money when my father was active in the labor movement, when he came from Abruzzo, Italy, and he set up a pizza place. And of course, they sold this 25 years ago to somebody else, but this is my dad's pizza shop. And somebody else owns it, and they're making a lot of money. My dad's name was Hermano. And let me see if I can find a picture of the building. Yeah, this is the building. This is the building. So you can see Hermano's Pizza. And there you can see that, right? And there you can see there's an apartment up here. And it was a cheap apartment because it was noisy. I mean, we ran a pizza store down here, right? So there was a single white woman who moved into that apartment up there. And she had a black boyfriend, an African-American boyfriend. And everybody living around this town, around this pizza store, came to my mother when she was working in the store and told her that she has to get rid of that woman because that woman is bringing a black man into our town. All of them came from around this area and approached my mom when she was working in that place to tell her, we don't tolerate this. We don't want black people in our town. And my father, being the frightened immigrant that he was, he's not going to fight with these people because they're already hostile to people that are not American. So I grew up working in this restaurant. And my father said, this is what paid for me to go to college, basically, was the income from this restaurant that they sold 25 years ago. So when I go back home, we still get pizza from there. And you know, that's a typical story. If you're a Korean or a Hispanic or Chinese, you come to America, you get a job, and then you make enough money to start a restaurant. You can sell Chinese food or Korean food or Mexican food, and you start a restaurant, right? So, but this is part of the history of this town. So, so that's why my father came here. And this is a typical story throughout the United States. And but in terms going back, let's go back to the notes then. But you know, this notion, for example, of Black people coming to school or even working out in a gym. I mean, I would go to the YMCA in that town, and there was Black people that come work out in that YMCA, and I could always sense that everybody in the YMCA gym where we were working, they would watch these Black people, including this Black woman had come in who was quite heavy, quite big, right? And so, I mean, the point I'm trying to make here in terms of this kind of approach, there's a subtext to all of these discussions. I told you, African-American women, African-Americans are disproportionately poor, they're disproportionately obese, they're disproportionately suffering from COVID because COVID makes pre-existing morbidities like diabetes and from obesity worse. So that's why this is an important topic. How does an African-American woman conceptualize her life and organize her thinking about her lifetime experience to justify going out, changing her pattern of behavior that she inherited from her family, from her mother or her family background, to go to a gym and go to a gym regularly? Because, you know, you don't just become physically fit by going to the gym one week. You've got to make it a lifestyle choice that requires years of effort. How do they make this change in their understanding of reality? And you map out in this grounded theory approach, you map out conceptually, schematically, with a table, with charts, how a person is conceptualizing their relationship to physical fitness in the form of going to a gymnasium, a YMCA, you know, 3 or 4 times a week, at least. Something that they don't have experience with. It's something new. It's something different. How do you make yourself do it? And it's difficult to do things like that, to change the way you were raised, the habits that you have internalized from your family background and your friends and its social environment background. Appendix E is an ethnographic study by Mack and Gal and Haywood. It focuses on young British-born working-class Muslim, Pakistani, and Bangladeshi men during late 2000s confronting changing cultural conditions. You know, growing up in a rapidly changing Britain, the identity formulation of these young Muslim men as members of a broader social community is the topic of the study. And again, the subtext unspoken there is, how do these people develop their identities as Muslim men in Britain, as Muslims, as part of a broader Muslim community? Much, you know, they're not highlighting it here, but like, for example, when the Islamic State was declared in Iraq and Syria in 2014, tens of thousands of Muslim people moved from Britain, from France, from Belgium to go fight for the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, bringing their families, their wives, their children. A number of the people that have been engaged in militant Islamic activity, they seem to become radicalized by being part of a diaspora. So this is part of the study of diasporas. Diasporas are people that move from one country because of threats and opportunities. They want to make a better life for themselves, or they're afraid they might be killed or hurt at home. But then they maintain an emotional identity connection with the home country they came from. And this is becoming a bigger and bigger and bigger portion of the world society due to immigration. You have Korean diasporas, you have Greek diasporas, you have Italian diasporas. I'm part of the Italian diaspora, right? And in fact, the Italian government wants me to think about being part of the Italian diaspora by allowing me to get Italian citizenship. The Italian government wants people like me born to my father before he became an American citizen. He became a citizen in 1965 or 66. I was born in 62. So according to Italian law, I'm allowed to claim Italian citizenship. Why? Because the Italian government wants me to remember that I'm Italian so that I will pressure and lobby Catholic University of Korea, the state of Ohio, Louisville, United States government to support Italy, support Italy, support Italy. So diasporas, of course, are very important. For example, Israel. I mean, Israel is intensely reliant upon the Jewish diaspora to support and promote Israel in Washington, in Paris, in Brussels, everywhere. Yes? My sister was born in 64, so she can become an Italian citizen, but she's not intellectually motivated. She didn't go to college. She's nice and everything, but she'll assimilate. But nobody else in my family is allowed because my father became an American citizen, and so they were born in 66 and in 68, and they cannot claim Italian citizenship. So again, it brings in elements of education, class. I mean, I think that might be one of the reasons I have this job, because they knew when I applied for this job that I also have Italian citizenship. And, you know, this place is very Catholic and Italians are Catholic and so on. So it helped me. And that's another. So there's this entire subtext about why this is important here, right? I mean, there's reasons why they chose these topics that they're not going to go into in this book. But anybody who knows these topic areas knows that there is all these other surrounding issues that we need to explore: diasporas, Islamic militancy, imperialism, the reaction of these Muslim people to the problems that they face in the Middle East because of the partition of the Muslim world into Pakistan and India and Iraq and Syria, and not by those people, but by the British and the French. Right? Those states that exist in the Arab world weren't created by the Arabs. They were created by the British and the French, and to a lesser extent, the Italians and others, right? To create these things called Syria and Iraq and Jordan and Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. So there is the subtext behind each of these topics, right? That you can't go into in the book. We can't go into here. I can only mention them, but there's reasons why these topics, these qualitative research projects have been selected, because they're significant in getting insight into these bigger questions, bigger contextual issues of what it means to be a Black person in America, what it means to be a Muslim in the world. What does it mean to be, I mean, Canada, I mean, a quarter of the people born in Canada live in Canada, were not born there. It's an incredibly diverse place. What's it like to grow up in a diverse place like that? Much more diverse than Louisville or Ohio. And then, of course, Appendix F is, I think it's more of a case study, right? It focuses on a teacher's relational practices as the teacher negotiates with students having a history of school failure in their educational relationships. So this is a case study. It seems to be a case study of a teacher who's working in a school where the children have a history, who go to the school because they fail out of the other schools. And again, this is an important topic. It's not really explained here. You think about how important your schools are. Something like half of the people that go to college and get degrees to become teachers, they then they start their careers as teachers, and then they leave, they quit, and they do something else, anything else. Half, 50%. Why do they do that? Because it's so difficult to be a teacher. When you have this dream or hope of inspiring young people and making them, opening up their potential and seeing the world in new ways, and you go into class and you've got these students that it's impossible, it seems, to get them to listen, that they don't want to work, they hate being there, they don't want to study. And that's why 50% of teachers in the US leave within 5 years and become anything else but teachers. They don't like it, they hate it. Here, this person is a teacher that has explicitly gotten a job in a school for students that fail. That's really interesting. What is that person like? How does that person succeed? How does that person stay motivated? I mean, I've heard anecdotally stories about teachers, teaching in some schools where, I don't think I could do it. It's just so depressing, in terms of you've got all these students in your classroom. A lot of them just hate being there. They don't care. They don't want to listen. They talk. They don't. And so how do you make yourself do your job? So again, these are all important topics. These are all research projects that are related to very deep and important topics that we're all concerned about. So a narrative study. The researcher chose Aimee Zhang to study how expectations from school and her teacher shapes her ethnic identity as a child of a Taiwanese, Fujianese immigrants living in Canada. Aimee related stories about her particular instance in her life. The author also observed Aimee in her classroom. The researcher also carried out interviews with Aimee as well as with other students. So you think about that. When you do your narrative studies of international students here in Korea, talk to their friends maybe if you want to, right? Because you took extensive field notes. Like maybe somebody's going to interview Kate at Gloria here as an international student. So if she's going to be one of your interviewees, you should be observing Gloria. You should be interacting with her, taking notes on Gloria, as well as interviewing Gloria as part of your narrative study. You're gathering data now because Gloria is the only international student here right now in the class, right? So the researcher, the teacher also actively participated in Aimee's school activities like the multicultural night, events going on after school. The researcher engaged in a family dinner with Aimee and engaged in classroom conversations with Aimee and her classmates. And again, this is an example of a narrative study. Exploring the conflicting stories that emerged during all of this data collection was the researcher's overriding interest. So again, we already highlighted one conflicting story that Aimee, when she's at school, she talks in standard Mandarin, but then she goes home and talks to her parents in Fujianese dialect. The researcher analyzed the data, organizing it by themes to present several conflicting stories. Aimee hid her home language at school because it was viewed as a hindrance to accepted English, which generated tensions in her friendships. It put pressure on Aimee to use the version of Chinese language used at school in contrast to her maternal language she used at home among her family. And multiple conflicting influences from her parents' expectations regarding her behavior and her school peers' expectations as well. Conflicts between teacher expectations to complete homework and prepare for tests and assignments on one hand, and family needs to help in the business. So the family has a business. It might be a restaurant, it might be a store, it might be a laundry. And, again, I can sort of relate to this. I mean, and class is important here. Chinese immigrants are different because they tend to emphasize more study. My parents never helped me at all in my homework. My father graduated from high school. My mother just graduated. They never once helped me on my homework. Right. So they never pressured me to be academically successful, but I wanted to be academically successful because I was good at it. And that's how I got self-esteem from my first grade teacher and the others. But this is a different environment. In Asian American households, academic achievement and study is really, really important for these poor people. Like, for example, if you read the New York Times, I focus a lot on the New York Times newspaper here in this course. They always have these reports out of New York City, how Asian students, they insist that New York City keep using standardized tests, like the SAT test you had to take to come to this university, because they do really well on those tests to get into the advanced prestige schools in New York for gifted students, like Stuyvesant, right? But then there are conflicts because these schools don't have a lot of Hispanic and Black students because they don't do as well on those tests. But Asians, although they're poor, they tend to do very well on these standardized SAT score type tests, right? So, and that's a source of conflict because Asian populations in New York City do not want the mayor of New York and the government of New York City getting rid of those tests, even though African American and Hispanic Americans, they want those tests to be reduced because it's not allowing enough Hispanic and Black students into those schools. Yes. Well, I mean, you know, we had, you mean Obama's election? Whose election? Oh, well, I mean, affirmative action, that's a controversial point, and I'm glad you mentioned it. I can talk about it later. Asian Americans do not like affirmative action because the affirmative action tends to benefit, oriented towards those groups that are structurally, systemically disadvantaged in the United States. So Blacks and Hispanics, not Asian. Asians, they tend to view affirmative action the way Jews do. Jewish Americans also do not like affirmative action because Jewish Americans, like Asian Americans, tend to do very well academically. So when Asian Americans hear the term affirmative action, it means fewer positions open for Asian students so we can make more positions for African and Hispanic students, even though those African American and Hispanic students do not do as well on the tests to enter. But we're going to give them extra benefit because they're Hispanics or Blacks. And this makes people furious, furious. It's not fair. It's not fair. I have dreams, and you're telling me I can't get into Harvard because I'm Asian. Fuck you. We're going to let this person into Harvard, even though they got lower scores on the SAT test because they're Black. And if you go to Harvard, you know what that means. Oh my God, you went to Harvard. It's like going to Yonsei or Seoul National University in Korea. You went to Harvard. Oh, your life is set. You can say, well, Asian Americans, let them go to Duke, or let them go to Brown University or Duke University or Princeton. No, I want to go to Harvard. The whole world knows about Harvard. And so people become furious about affirmative action because it typically is oriented towards those traditionally marginalized groups that were stereotyped as backward and childlike. So-called people of color, Blacks and Hispanics. And this is a big part of the Republican mobilization to win the upcoming elections in November. You know, the critical race theory, this is all supposed to punish white people for being white and give benefits to other people who are not white simply because they're not white. Critical race theory and so on. So the researcher also reflected on her own experiences in undertaking the study. So the narrative researcher, how the events she participated in shaped the researcher's understanding, how her opportunities emerged to build trust with Amai and her family, how her relationship with Amai was negotiated, how the researcher developed a sense of advocacy for Amai. So in sum, the study contributed to understanding the challenges of minority or immigrant students, the expectations of teachers, peers, students, and parents, and how they intersected, how these interactions shape the values of students in individual ethnic communities. Like, why do these international students come to South Korea of all places? I mean, they could go to US maybe. I mean, Korea is really cool. I mean, K-pop, everybody knows about K-pop and, you know, I mean, it'd be interesting to know why did these international students choose to come to Korea of all places when they could have supposedly gone to some other country? In terms of your own narrative study projects. More broadly, the study instructed the efforts of administrators and teachers who work with these diverse populations. So again, this person was doing this narrative study so that people that run schools could read it and use the knowledge, the information to be more effective in teaching students, teaching immigrant children. And yeah, keep that in mind. Like I said, in Toronto, Canada, half the population was not born in Canada. It's incredibly diverse, the most diverse place in North America. Yeah, because this AMI study is at a Canadian school. I recall reading that from the study. It's a Canadian high school. More broadly, the study instructs the efforts of administrators and teachers. As I already said, the study serves an example of a life-based literary narrative. The defining features of a narrative study as presented in chapter 4 are introduced clearly in this article. The researcher collected stories from a single individual, Amai Zhang, a Chinese immigrant student. I don't think that's probably her real name. The collaborative nature of how the researcher gathered the stories, and the relationship that emerged between the researcher and the participant in the study was explicitly highlighted. The researcher chose specifically on the cultural identity of the student, A. Mai Zhang, as well as on how the peers, teachers, and parents helped to shape the identity. I think I misspelled this. The researcher chose specifically on focusing on the cultural identity of the student. You know, international students, that's something else. You're only here for 6 months or a year. You know you're only here for 6 months or a year. Mai Zhang knows, or at least assumes, she's living her life in Canada. She can't leave after 6 months. So cultural identity is an important topic, right? Through use of different forms of data, such as interviews, field notes, observations, and attendance at events, the researcher created an evidence base of information in order to explore this cultural identity. And of course, this study was undertaken over 2 years, right? Or a year and a half at least. Sufficient opportunity existed to study the unfolding events over time because the researcher gathered information from the fall of 2001 to June 2003. So the construction of the narrative, however, did not include a chronology of themes. Yeah, so you don't really, it's difficult to know when reading the study what happened when. Instead, by reporting what happened to this individual student, also to her parents and to her school, the researcher used a thematic analysis. In each of the themes, the researcher highlighted specific tensions that arose. For example, the tension between using Fujianese at home and Mandarin at school, with her Chinese friends, and then of course the language of the school is English because it's in Canada, or English and French if it's in Quebec, in Montreal. A specific turning point or epiphany in the storyline was not a feature of the overall narrative. So, you know, this turning point was not a focus on this narrative study. Most of the incidents occurred in the context of a Bay Street school. That is, it was the context or place which the researcher discussed. Okay, so, and then if you decide to go to graduate school, and you do a master's thesis or PhD, you're probably going to do a phenomenological study. If you do a qualitative research, you're probably not going to do a narrative study. You're probably going to expect to do something more, and that was probably be a phenomenological study. So it might be worth focusing on, because this is what you do if you have to write a master's thesis or a doctoral thesis, and you want to do a qualitative approach. The Cresswell and Poth review the literature that this is focusing on AIDS patients, right? So this is a study that investigated the cognitive representations or images that AIDS patients had of their disease. The incentives for the study, their therapy would be shaped by how patients represented AIDS to themselves and the emotions that associated with it. I mean, I don't know what you think about AIDS, but I remember when this first emerged when I was in college, you know, and the stigma, it was considered a gay disease, right? And so it's such a terrible stigma. You got AIDS, oh God, you know. If you're going to deal with these people and you're going to try to help them, their emotional well-being is likely going to have to be a focus of the study. You want to reduce high-risk behaviors, and you want to enhance their quality of life. So the authors begin by noting that millions of individuals have been infected by AIDS. The authors promoted a cognitive framework, the self-regulation model of illness representation. This framework postulated, and again, they know this from the literature, the work that's already been published in peer-reviewed journals. They're building upon that knowledge. So typically when you write a dissertation, there's 5 chapters. Chapter 1 is the introduction. Chapter 2 is the literature review. Chapter 3, and that's where you review this peer-reviewed scholarly literature. Chapter 3 is your methodology, your explanation of your research project and how you went about your research. 4 is the presentation of the findings. And then the 5th chapter is the conclusion and interpretation. So this model builds upon what's already been published, and that tells you what you need to research, or gives you an indication of what you need to research to find more data and more information, because you think that there is a gap or weakness or absence in the literature that you reviewed in chapter 2. So as I told you, this is a creative process. It's also a process where you have to have a lot of self-confidence, because you're going to critique the literature. You're going to critique the scholarly literature. And you're going to say, there are these gaps that I'm going to fill in through my creative, original, new contribution to knowledge. You got to be bold. You got to be strong. You have to be willing to fight for what you believe, because it's, you know, it's something that is pretty bold endeavor to engage in social science research, to claim that you review the scholarly literature and you say, there's a critical weakness and I'm going to fill it. And I'm going to tell you how I'm going to fill it through this research study. So this framework postulates that patients are active problem solvers. Their responses to this health threat produce their behavior. Patients' understanding of their disease emerged from illness representations, that is, the images they had formed in their own heads. Understanding these images more fully is necessary to help them with their behavior, quality of life, and therapy, right? So you have to know what's going on in their own heads, in their own minds, if you're going to treat them. Because, you know, you have to live with this disease. You know, back in 2000, I don't know when this study was done. Now, since then, they've developed medicines that you can live with this disease for decades. But it was a chronic disease you had to deal with for years and years and years. And if you're not careful, you could infect other people. And some people didn't care. I mean, they're already dealing with the fact that they belong to stigmatized groups. They are told by society around them that they should be ashamed, that they're disgusting, that they're despised. Now they're supposed to care about other people when they get infected. They're not supposed to look for intimate relationships with other people. Very sensitive, difficult topics, right? So the authors reviewed the literature on patients' experiences with AIDS. They focused on the qualitative research literature. They noted that several phenomenological studies have been done on how patients coped and lived with HIV. However, they noted that there had not been a phenomenological study on how patients represented AIDS in their own images, in their own minds. The research design involved 58 men and women and men with diagnosis of AIDS. They used the procedures advanced by Coladzi and which Motsakas modified for phenomenology. Over 18 months, the authors conducted interviews with 58 patients. It sounds like these people had money. Somebody gave these researchers money to do this project. And it probably was people involved in the medical industry, right? They want information, knowledge on how to better treat people with HIV/AIDS. The interview question: what is your experience with AIDS? Do you have a mental image of HIV/AIDS, or how would you describe HIV/AIDS? What feeling comes to mind? What meaning does it have in your life? And the authors also asked the patients to draw pictures of their disease. Only 8 of the 54 agreed to draw pictures. And the pictures were integrated into the data analysis. Yeah, so this is my, highlight. And of course, anybody who's reading this book knows what I just wrote here, that it's associated with gay people or drug users, people that use dirty needles because they're addicted to drugs and they're injecting themselves with heroin and use infected needles that are dirty and they get AIDS that way. That's another way to get AIDS, common way. So the data analysis consisted of the following tasks. 1, in order to obtain an overall feeling for the written transcripts of the interviews, reading through them first several times. So then identifying sentences or phrases that were significant, which related directly to the experience, devising meanings and then clustering them into themes that were common to all the participants' interview transcripts. Again, so you need to have a theory to help you do that. 4, to produce an exhaustive, in-depth description of the phenomenon. The authors integrated the results of the above step, and then validating the findings by commuting them with the participants, including the final description of the participants' remarks. So you share your research with the people you interview. You let them read the study and say, what do you think? Is this valid? So based on 175 significant statements, this analysis led to 11 major themes. 2 of the themes were illustrated by drawings. dreaded bodily destruction, and devouring life. Each of the 11 themes were reported in the results section. That's chapter 4. To illustrate the multiple perspectives on each theme, numerous quotes and perspectives were included. So when you interview people, including in your narrative study, if your interviewee, the person you interview, says something really interesting, really important, quote them. Quote them in your 5 to 7 page analysis. You want to have quotes that are really powerful from your interview texts. The study concluded with the authors describing the essence of the experiences of the patients, the coping strategies of the patients which they use to regulate their disease and their mood. These coping strategies focus on the context or conditions that surround the experience of the disease. And then the authors compared their findings with those of other authors in the literature. And there also was a discussion of the implications for nursing as well as questions for further research. Again, so this was meant to be used, the knowledge was meant to be used by practitioners in the medical field dealing with these kind of patients. So several aspects of a phenomenological study were illustrated in the study. The phenomenon, that is, that cognitive representations or images which AIDS patients held, was the focus of examination. There was also a group of individuals where the focus of rigorous data collection using 58 interviews and the incorporation of patients' drawings. Only briefly did the authors mention the philosophical ideas underpinning the phenomenology. The justification was in order to bracket their personal experiences and to explore lived experiences. So they're not going to spend a lot of time talking about the philosophical framework they're using in terms of epistemology of knowledge. In the limited space available, the focus was not on obtaining theoretical explanations. In the study, the authors discussed bracketing. Who are you doing this interview? Like, you have to explain your perspective that you're trying to be aware of so that you can try to control for it, to prevent your own biases coming in. I mean, think about that. I mean, I don't think I've ever dealt with a person who's got HIV/AIDS. There are millions of people that have it. I never knew anybody personally that's had it. And it's not something people want to just tell you. So I don't know how I would deal with it. That's what I'm saying. Like if I'm a nurse or I work in the medical field, I probably will have to deal with those people. And I would like some knowledge, some research to help me be an effective care provider for those kind of people. Consequently, they explained that the interviewer was both a healthcare provider and a researcher of individuals with HIV/AIDS. The interviewer therefore had to acknowledge these experiences and attempt to bracket them. Regarding data collection, it focused on 58 interviews, which the authors conducted over 18 months. The interviews occurred at 3 sites, 3 places. These sites were part of organizations that dedicated themselves to services to persons with HIV/AIDS. So a long-term care facility, a hospital-based clinic, and a residence. Data analysis was systematically undertaken with procedures focusing on significant themes, meanings, and statements. The exhaustive description of the essence of the phenomena corresponded with the procedures that Moutsakas recommends. The authors demonstrated how they work with the raw data to the exhaustive description of the study's essence through including tables, which illustrate the significant statements, meanings, and theme clusters, which they included in the final discussion section. So when you do phenomenological study, you're also supposed to have tables, which list the major themes, how many times they appeared in the interview data. You have to somehow try to summarize your qualitative data in terms of the themes and the frequency of those themes that emerged. The conclusion of the study it described the essence of the experience of the 58 patients, the context in which these 58 patients experienced AIDS, that is the coping mechanisms. So maybe we should go to our debate now, since this seems like a good place to do that. And since I don't have to worry about converting the file on the computer because I can't use the classroom computer, I'm just going to use my laptop. So things are a little bit more flexible here. So, Gloria, since you're going to do the debate, you, of course, are welcome to speak to your camera to make sure everybody can see you. You're also welcome to stand up and move about. Again, to remind you regarding let me open up. Oh, I forgot to do the smart attendance. Okay, thank you. I forgot to do smart attendance. So we go to methodology, class, log in, and we go to methodology. We go to attendance, and we go to, we are already in week 11, smart attendance, and start attendance, and your number is 930. 930 is your smart attendance number. So we go to 930. Let me go to chatting, put in 930. 930, that's your smart attendance number. Okay, so, and then we go to the cyber campus, and we go to the vote. And, you know, I'm always trying to make the debate process a little bit more useful and effective for helping you learn and improve your public speaking skills. So I've tried to put the debate evaluation rubric on the vote function of the cyber campus. So that's why they got all these different vote that you're going to do here that are all anonymous. You can see anonymous, it's all anonymous. All the debate votes are anonymous. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want you, when it's your turn to debate and your turn to debate, to think, okay, well, I watched other debates, I evaluated those debates, so I have to make sure that I conform and develop my own debate performance in accordance with how I evaluated other people. So if I think Gloria's presentation opening statement was excellent, then I should learn from Gloria in terms of her presentation style or her opening statement or her rebuttal, or from Professor Ben. Am I con, Gloria? Okay, in terms of my use of the week's reading material, or if I do not think Professor Ben is doing so well in the rebuttal, and I only give Professor Ben satisfactory or limited or poor, then you have to make sure you don't make the same mistakes that Professor Ben made on his opening statement or his rebuttal or his presentation style. You see that? That's the reason I want you, because I want people to think about, you have to constantly think about how to improve your performance. And that means critiquing. And then when you critique, you say, well, I said this about that person, so I have to make sure that I do this to make it better. That's the reason I'm doing this. Okay. So, because again, this is performance, and performance means preparation. Whether you're an actor, whether you're a professor, you've got to prepare to make it look, and that you prepare so well that it looks easy, but it's not easy. Okay. Let's go back to the debate topic. So it is, and Gloria's pro, and people are already voting. How can they already vote? Oh, that's last week. Sorry, screwed that up. Let me go back to the to South Koreans, the social sciences exist to assist social change. Okay, Gloria, so you can speak up to 6 minutes. Well, and we're kind of flexible on the time. And of course, if the students want to ask extra credit questions, they can. Yeah, that's, thank you for reminding me. Yeah, you need to share your screen. And you're already a co-host, I think? Okay, so multiple participants can share on that. So I've set that. So Gloria, you can share your screen, and you're pro, right? So you can do whatever you want, Gloria, whatever you want. This is the world of Zoom. This is the post-pandemic world. You remember, your task is to win and to get the highest ranking available. So how can you get people to vote for you and vote for you at the highest scores? You want to persuade your audience. So Gloria, whatever you think your performance requires in order to defeat me, you can do. you can go anywhere you want. Can everybody hear me? Okay, go ahead.
Yep. Okay. So Richard Buckminster Fuller said one day, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing one obsolete." I quite disagree with that quotation. To make change in the world and in people, you also need the support. You can focus on both, either or both, but you also need to support the change with scientific information. So what are social sciences? Social sciences are defined by researchers as any branch of academic study or science that deal with human behavior in its social and cultural aspects. Anthropology, sociology, psychology, political science, and economics are included within that framework. Then social science is defined also by researchers as the way human interaction and relationship transform cultural and social institution over time, affecting deeply society with long-term consequences. That's why we should care for these changes, and that's also why we should learn how to cope with them, how to deal with them, and how to understand them, but also how to make them happen. In people's mind, there's frightening question about how thinking of society can change it are becoming tremendous and recurrent. Social media are slightly becoming the new sources of data concerning social changes and are slowly but harshly replacing actual scientific knowledge and social sciences. As identified by Paul Almos, all sociological communication to people modify their behavior as well as their moral valuation. Therefore, for this reason and those that follow, I stand firmly in support of today's resolution that social science exists to assist social changes. And I will base both concepts on the values of quality of life, progress, quality of the future, and human dignity. Social change transform our cultural and social institution and they hold long-term consequences for society. Movement from civil rights, such as women's rights, LGBT rights, Black Lives Matter, and so on, help prove my point. Our collective and common power is so strong that we can help and shape the direction of this change and create the one we want to see in society. Always wondering and evaluating social sciences related to social changes can sharpen the question and the research and shape the form. Poor health is one of the most pressing social and economic problems we face today as a society, especially in America. The Institute of Medicine released a study where it explained that compared to 16 other economical comparable nations, the USA ranked last in life expectancy for males and second to last for females. Americans also suffer from the poorest health over the lifetime, the highest rates of infant mortality, obesity in adolescents, and cardiovascular diseases in adults. Also, out of every 10 deaths in the USA are caused by chronic conditions such as diabetes, Alzheimer's, HIV, AIDS, cancer, depression, those diseases that can be prevented or minimized. Social sciences and research will address this concern and make improvement in human health section. In USA, they are working on identifying the types of stress factors that can lead to bad health, but also the underlying biological and psychological processes. They're also developing new online platform managing different kind of stress factors, such as the strain. They said that by being aware of what challenges society is facing, we are able to pursue researches that effectively addresses society's greatest needs. Talking about health, I personally did NUN as a modeling of United Nations last year. I'm at Brussels University. And let me tell you that we were representing Tunisia and UNEDS, and it's the section in the UN for coping with HIV, AIDS, and tuberculosis infection all over the world. Even in the draft, social science experimentation, testimonies, and personal data were used as a sociological and psychological background for collecting the data and achieving solutions such as urinary tests for tuberculosis, online checking for special meds to AIDS infected people, and so on. These kind of changes are proceeded and observable in phenomenological studies. They discuss the AIDS and HIV representation and how the emotional response is related to it. It can influence their therapy, their quality of life, and reduce risk behavior. This kind of studies suggest that the patient are problem solvers and that their attitude is a product of their cognitive and emotional response. The illnesses representation in patient and in medical field were the main thing that doctors needed to understand to help and to better their therapy and well-being.
Questions? Questions? Anybody have a question for an extra credit participation point? If not, you can, of course, she's going to speak twice more as pro. So now I want to, would like you to let me see if I can go back to the cyber campus. And where did the cyber camp, I mean, I'm going to go back to cyber just a second. So got to find the cyber campus here, go here. And so you can see, let's see, pro opening statement. Where's pro opening statement? Okay, pro opening statement. So let me go back to Zoom. Pro opening statement. So we go to, it's not letting me share very easily here. So share screen. One more time, 1 second. Well, I mean, that's okay because everybody's allowed to share screen. I'm gonna, okay, so then we go to share screen. And so opening statement. So everybody, including the debater, everybody's voting anonymously, vote in terms of pros opening statement, excellent, good, satisfactory, and so on. It's anonymous, it's anonymous. So I'll never know how you vote, including the debater. The debaters vote as well, except me, I'm not gonna vote. Okay, so I will then make my opening statement as Khan. And so let me go back to the vote and Khan opening statement. And let me find that if I can do that. Khan opening statement. Okay, so you can see the on the share screen, Khan opening statement. Make sure that you can see that. Okay, so Khan opening statement. Okay, so I will now make my opening statement on the topic as to whether or not, what is the topic? All social change, because I get confused listening to South Korea. Social sciences exist to assist social change. So let me, again, share screen. And I'm kind of jealous of Gloria because she's standing up there. So I'm going to stand up too, just to, because I want to win. I want to win. So maybe you want to watch this. Ladies and gentlemen, we do not do social science ultimately for social change. Why do we do social science? We do social science because we want to understand Homo sapiens. Our first objective is to understand human beings as human beings. If we become focused on trying to bring about social change through social science, we will make terrible mistakes because we will not know ultimately what we are doing if we engage in such behavior. The world is filled with do-gooders who want to make the world a better place according to their own images and beliefs about how the world should look. But those do-gooders, they end up making more problems and causing more destruction because they make certain fundamental assumptions. They don't explore their fundamental assumptions. They don't understand human nature well enough. As, for example, in another topic that Gloria participated in the European politics class, one of our debate topics is the European Union federalism is utopian and therefore dangerous. Utopianism is this image that I have. I want to create this wonderful, perfect image of the world, and I'm going to make it happen now, here. And what do you get? You get Mao Zedong's great leap forward and millions dying from famine and destruction. You get the Cultural Revolution, causing more millions to die in trying to create this utopian image that Mao Zedong is promoting to the Chinese, or Stalin's creation of the workers and peasants' paradise that is vicious and brutal and violent, or going back to the French Revolution. So social science is not fundamentally about social change. Well, sure, some social science wants to understand the world in order to adopt better policies to make the world more effective and functioning. But ultimately, our first task is to understand human nature. Understand human nature, because if you try to make social policy prescriptions on the basis of false assumptions that are incorrect regarding human nature, you will create unexpected, unintended outcomes and consequences that can cause terrible danger and terrible suffering for the world. Because you didn't predict these outcomes, because I was deluded in my utopian vision that I undertake what I call science. And I use science as a weapon to convince you that what I say is not my personal preference. No, it's science. So what I want is good for you. This is what the criticisms of social scientists emerge today in the United States and elsewhere about critical race theory, that these professors and social scientists and critical race theorists and feminists, they don't like the world. They don't like the world because they don't like their lives. And so they try to convince you, the students, that you should listen to me, the unhappy single person who doesn't have satisfying emotional relationships, that I'm not the problem. The world is the problem. And I should convince you to obey me and challenge the fundamental traditional assumptions that your parents and your grandparents had about what is right and wrong, what is good and bad. That I'm brainwashing you through my social science and in the form of critical race theory or gay studies or feminist studies, queer theory. And that's the main criticism that the Republican Party and many people, also here in South Korea, Yoon Suk Yeol won the presidential election on that claim that these leftists, so these social scientists, they're leftists. And they don't come out openly say they want to change the world in the way that they prefer. They claim that what they're doing is the truth, is uncovering the truth. And that, and because they're professors and because they have PhDs, that somehow they know better what's best for people than the moksa and the shinbu, the priests and the ministers and your families and your elders. Don't believe them. Our first task as social scientists is to understand Homo sapiens. Like I said in my other classes, a political scientist, which is what I identify as. A political scientist is a zoologist who studies Homo sapiens, human beings. And you can see these patterns that emerge, for example, in the way Russia is acting now in Ukraine. It reminds me of what happened in Europe 80 years ago, or what the Americans are doing when they began their war on terror after the September 11, 2001 attacks, torturing people, justifying it in Guantanamo Bay, in CIA black sites, torturing, killing people in these societies, and just ignoring it, not calling it torture, just like the Germans are good people. Yes. Ideology? Well, that's a good point. If we're going to study Homo sapiens, we need to understand the role of ideology as a manifestation of Homo sapien behavior. And that means rhetoric and ethics. And ideology automatically means appealing to you to support my utopian vision of the future by convincing you through my ideological symbols that what I want is good not just for me, it's good for you and you and you and the whole universe. Like communism, right? That socialism is good for everybody, not just for the Communist Party and the Communist Party apparatus. So yes, understanding Homo sapiens means understanding basically what we're doing here, communicating. And ideology serves fundamentally is a desired future that I want to create, a utopian desired future I want to create. But that utopian desired future reflects the problems I confront today in 1917 Russia, or 1933 Germany, or 2022 Russia. right? And that means it's specific and not universal, even if I claim it is universal. So I think that's my time is up, and so now we go to the vote here and go back to Khan's opening statement. And let's see if I can, too many things here. Khan's opening statement. Okay, make sure I'm sharing the screen here. And there you can see Khan's opening statement. So vote. Again, it's anonymous. I don't know who you are. All right, so you can be honest if you think I'm excellent or not. And okay, and then now we go to rebuttal. And so we go back to pro rebuttal. Let's go to pro rebuttal. Give pro a minute or two to think about what the wise, profound things that Khan has said, how she can respond. So, okay, pro, you can begin.
Yeah, okay. So you said, we don't know exactly what we are doing directly. And I respond that we don't need to know exactly what we are doing directly. Even harder sciences took time to supply their knowledge. The amount of science's discovery came, I'm muted. The amount of science discovery came and created a new paradigm is tremendous in the world. It is not utopian to wish for a better life. French Revolution, for example, was necessary to support people's idea, and that doesn't make France as a destroyed country now. You know how many people lost their life on eugenicism? And because when you said that social sciences cause terrible danger, you call for biological extremism, as what happened in Rwanda with scientists that made of sadistic and mutable architect and primary master of what a human should be. Social sciences also help students to get out of depression during bad time like COVID-19, and we saw what letting human aside of medical field and discussion made to people. Ideology is something that takes the primary place in a structural environment, but that's not what's happening with social sciences because they collaborate with other sciences. Social sciences can also support social changes and minorities in culture. A narrative study can also decide to focus on an immigrant student, story and evolution throughout time, as well as the experience she had to go through, the transition she had to do between their life at school and when they are with their parents. This kind of studies can help us understand the challenges an immigrant or a minority student, for instance, can deal with at school, their interaction with peers, teachers, and their parents. Their own behavior and values are shaped by it. It also gave data about the job of teacher working with these students from diverse ethnicities. It then can serve as an instance for other professors and help to build some aids to correctly equip homes and correctly equip schools in order to welcome correctly this kind of students.
Questions to pro? Yes, Georg.
Thank you for your speech, Gloria. And you mentioned about the social issues like minority issues or medical bills.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you, what is the relationship between data and social science and the policy?
And the policy?
Yeah, the political policy, yeah.
What kind of policy?
Like the policy, like the election or the political issue.
The election, yeah. Okay. When you focus on election, you have to make, you have to pay attention to the agenda. When you become a politician or you enter in that field, you have to know every step of the way to the new paradigm of political sciences. For entering the rules and making them, you have to know directly what steps are needed to register a rule in the agenda, in the political agenda, and to go from the point where you are just a citizen and you make a new rule happening. You can be a feminist, you can be an LGBT rights defender, you can activist is better. You can be a Black Lives Matter community, but you have to be part of social science. You have to be part of a movement, of a citizen right membership or movement or whatever, and you have to fight. You have to fight so hard that these big guy upstairs, I don't know, up in the political field, heard about you and wants to make your rule bigger, to make them official. So this kind of, you know, the political field is completely linked with movements, civil movements, social sciences, because social sciences is human behavior and change in institution, and they are made by social people. So people, human, that's right. Yes, civil movement, citizenship, fights, people wanting more and better life, make politics. They make politics. They can. Thank you.
Okay, and so going back to the share screen, and I think you can see this. And so that was pro rebuttal. So please vote on pro rebuttal. When pro has rebutted me, so you can vote on pro rebuttal. Again, it's anonymous. And then we go to Khan will now rebut and conclude. Khan will rebut and conclude. And so let me go back to the Khan rebuttal and conclusion, and I will start my timer. And this damn screen thing, 8, 6, 4, 5. Start. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, okay. Of course, we engage in social research, but let's not call it science. Who can disagree with what she said? Yeah, we want to change the world. We want to affect the world. We want to shape the world. Well, why do we have to call it science? Science brings to mind this notion of objective truth, right? That somehow science is sacred. That knowledge is true. It's not necessarily true, but people who want to call themselves scientists, they want the authority and the influence that comes from this notion of what they're arguing and what they're promoting in terms of social change is somehow natural and right and correct. And anybody who opposes them is against truth and therefore evil and wrong. When human beings make this world, and they make this world according to their own desires and images, and the whole focus of conservatism, going back to Edmund Burke as maybe the most famous conservative theorist in the Anglo-Saxon tradition, the English tradition, Edmund Burke, a conservative theorist, he made these same points that I'm making here right now, that when you attempt to change society in according to some imagined abstract image of let's abolish the traditional family, let's smash heteropatriarchy, let's smash the patriarchal family with the heterosexual man as the leader of the family and replace it with a world in which we no longer have traditional gender norms and stereotypes. And this is utopian disaster that's being promoted. You have to be very careful in promoting change in society. And these queer theorists and these feminist theorists and these critical race theorists, they want to smash the existing order because they say it's fundamentally oppressive. That, let's pick on the Americans, that American society, the American state is based upon settler colonialism, and that it's systemically racist, and that and then anybody who is doing well in that system somehow is perpetuating and reinforcing the systemic racism because they're doing well in the system. And I mean, just complete disregard for the fact of how, for example, the world existed 400 years ago, 500 years ago. 99.9% of people thought women should not have the right to vote. Now, were they all evil, wrong? No, that was the conditions that existed at the time in which muscle and strength was required for people to survive, and men and women had to pair up and make children to take care of themselves when they got old, and women were dependent upon men to survive in a world in which strength and physical might was important for survival, working as a farmer 300 years ago. So, okay, the world has changed. Yes, the world has changed, but we have to be very careful about how we as authorities, as we as leaders, critique the world around us, because we are ourselves creations of this order. I am a professor. This is a university that emerged out of this order that we inherited from our ancestors to build a better world. And then for me to have, as a professor, to have the audacity to say, this is an oppressive, systemically racist system that exists in the United States. And it's built upon the racial subjugation and white supremacy. What kind of progress? What kind of goodness comes out of that? How is that going to make America a better place by instead encouraging hatred and resentment? That anybody who's white has an advantage over anybody who's not white, and they should feel, including those poor people that live, for example, poor white people that live in West Virginia or Kentucky or Tennessee, that can barely survive on their paycheck, and being torn apart by opioid addiction and fentanyl addiction as part of the despair of the collapse of those industries. You want to use those terms, white supremacy, with them? What are they going to do? They're going to say you can go to hell, and they're going to vote for Donald Trump. And that's why Donald Trump won in West Virginia by 40 percentage points over Hillary Clinton, despite the fact that's the poorest state in the country. Out of the 50, it's 49th or 50th between Mississippi and West Virginia. It's overwhelmingly white. But they're the strongest supporters of Donald Trump because Donald Trump was telling them, these liberal leftists are telling you that you are somehow evil, despite your poverty, and you don't even know you're evil, because you're basically reinforcing white supremacy by the very fact that you exist and live. I mean, these leftists live in their little worlds of disdain and anger, and they critique and criticize, and that's okay. You're welcome to critique and criticize all you want. But then when they come to classes and they start teaching you and brainwashing you to be like me. I'm the smart guy. I'm the Kyosuni. I know what's right more than you know what's right. More than your parents know what is right. No, more than what your Moksa or Shinbu know what is right. Listen to me. I should be the new priest, the new Moksa for this world, and justify it on the basis of science. It's fundamentally utopian. It's fundamentally corrupt, and it will fail. And I might not, and you might not be the one who makes it fail, but there will always be people like Donald Trump around who emerge to exploit that resentment everywhere. Okay, so let me go. So that's the con, rebuttal, and conclusion. So please vote on con, rebuttal, and conclusion. That's me. Okay, on the, you can see the screen. I think you can see share screen. So just to make sure that it is working, share screen. And then, okay, so okay, we have some votes. And again, you have until like 12 o'clock to do this voting. I think you can change it if you want to. So now we will go to pro conclusion. Pro has the last word. And so let me find pro conclusion. Oh, I'd say, oh, I did it twice. Oh, so I have to do it again. Let me edit this then and go pro conclusion. Okay. So save. Okay. And Pro may proceed. Yes.
Black women serve as slaves in the medical field in the slave's time by American and European doctors, and this horrific period made big changes in gynecological field, such as hard science. But at what price? Today's women are still suffering from hard science because hard science was studied by men, for example. Sciences are not something that we discover from heaven, but something that is still interpreted by the person that discovered them. It then can be biased as everything else, and you know that. Social sciences exist to maintain the balance and stop scientific extremism and abuse on women, minorities, men, and so on. Social sciences can help. Social sciences can help social changes, better human quality of life. So 5 different qualitative studies are often used to address social science, which are identified as social science. They all depend on the focus that best fits your needs. The central aim of the approach can vary from the individual to the phenomenon, but also collecting data from the field and then developing a theory. Social changes transform our cultural and social institution, and they hold long-term consequences for society. Social sciences and research will address concern and make improvement in human health section, for example, as in America. Social sciences can also support social changes in minorities and culture, as I said before. And as the example with the immigrant students, we also have the instance with women, especially with Miss Astier, who fight for new rules to allow women to wear a pair of trousers. That was so tremendous in that time that it breaks like 1,000 of years of intergenerational curses, and it opens the door to a lot of huge changes. Work employment, work insurance and protection, citizenship, bank account, and so on and so forth. Discovering how these feminists, for instance, achieve so many changes and evaluating which figures the process can help the modern feminists, so I, for example, to recreate the good. We need to learn from the past and the scientific knowledge we have in our hands. We need to learn from each other, and thanks to social sciences, a lot more social changes are yet to come.
Okay, so you can vote on the.
I didn't listen.
Huh?
I was muted, but it's okay. I think
I didn't. Who didn't listen?
And the computer. I muted. I forgot to mute.
You want to do it again?
I don't know.
Nobody could hear? Oh no. Oh, it's all part of the fun of.
Maybe Kritika can say if she heard me.
Kritika, did you hear Gloria?
Yes, faintly.
Kritika,
Yes, I could hear her faintly.
did you hear Gloria, Kritika?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay, okay. So let me now go back to the pro conclusion. So you can vote on the pro conclusion, and also you can vote on the presentation style, pro and con presentation style. So there's pro presentation style. I got to make sure I'm sharing the screen again. So share here. So pro presentation style, you can vote here. And then also on con presentation style. And there you see con presentation style. Okay, it's anonymous as well. And then also use of the ideas and concepts in the reading material. So I guess we can go to pro use of reading material in terms of ideas and concepts in the reading for this week to try to persuade you, the audience, as to which side is more valid. And then cons use of reading material. So we go to con use of reading material, week's reading material here. And you can vote on that. And then we go to the big ones. Ta-da-da-dum. Who won the debate? Ta-da-da-dum. It's anonymous. And so pro and con here. Okay, so again, and then we go to the next one, which is grade the debate. And grade the debate. And so you can see that here. Again, it's anonymous. Okay. So, all right. So that's it. Again, the debate, the vote closes off at noon. So let me, for the remaining time in class, continue. Thank you, Gloria. So let me use the rest of the time to go back to our notes. No, just Wednesday this time because Gloria has to go and won't be here on Friday. So yeah, typically the debates will be on Friday, but this was a special situation. So that reminds me, if we go to the sign up debate sign up, people should sign up for debate. And so I think you can see this in case you can't maybe make sure that you can see this. So there you see the debate sense. Gloria's this week. Deok is next Friday, and Katika signed up. Other people signed up, so other people can also sign up. Starting a week from today, not Monday, but a week from today, we go back to everybody meeting in class. I got the word from the university that everybody's going to be meeting in class again starting a week from today. We're not going to do this half in, half out, although we still have to wear these masks. I got my 4th booster yesterday, so I'm vigilant in the struggle against the evil Corona-19 virus. And so I feel excited about that. And so so that's the plan. Okay. And then, so what's left here in terms of, we just did a debate on this topic. So maybe I can also go back to this exercise that I keep putting off, and we can do it now. And so about the scientific method, Russ Dodet, he is the New York Times go-to conservative, kind of smart columnist. He's, I think, a strong Catholic. He's a little weird at times, but he's interesting. So, he's always trying to defend religion. And here, okay, so here's his defense of religion. When I was a child, I lived in several worlds. First was the world that I understood to be the normal one, a world where people had professional degrees and followed their doctors' instructions and strictly and carefully, a world ruled by a solid seeming secular and liberal consensus about what was scientific, what was certain, what was true. Then there was the other stranger worlds, which we explored for reasons of chronic illness or religious interest, and some of the roving curiosity defined my parents' generation at its best. First was the world of charismatic religion, where people sought healing and spoke in tongues and prophesied. Do you have that in Korea? These people that somehow they believe they get so religiously ecstatic that they start mumbling and using. You do that? People speak in tongues? And prophesied experiencing the divine as probably as people in the secular world experience, say, this newspaper's pronouncements. Second was the world of alternative medicine and what was still then described disparaging as health food, the shabby little pre-Whole Food store selling organic vegetables and carob and tofu. Yeah, tofu is an exotic thing in America, tofu. All right, of course, it's a staple in Asia. The chiropractic offices smelling of essential oils, the vegetarian restaurants with new age bookstores umbilically attached. I found myself thinking about those childhood worlds while browsing Steven Pinker's Enlightenment Now, a big book by a big thinker written to defend reason against its enemies, be they the populist right, like Donald Trump, the identity politics left, like, I guess the culture warriors, or a larger crew of historical villains from Rousseau, the French Revolution, to Nietzsche, that supposedly, the ideological forebear of Nazism, whom Pinker blames for impeding civilization's march towards ever greater wealth and health and peace. His book is at once a statutory reminder of the material progress modern science and commerce have delivered in a propagandistic treatment of the past. Pinker defends a selectively edited enlightenment that conforms neatly to his style of liberal politics, that is strictly secular, mildly libertarian, anti-political correctness, and absolves his idealized version of the modern project of all imperial and eugenic and centralizing cruelties and all the genocides and prosecutions justified in reason's name. And I didn't highlight the whole thing here, so I guess I don't want to really spend the whole thing on it, but that's because those world's inhabitants were a self-selected population who had either experienced something transformative or suffered something debilitating and been told by the official consensus, we have no answers for you yet. Why do people become religious, in other words? And so they ventured out in search of answers in an intensely experimental spirit, trying to see what people or prayers or situations recreated the initial religious experience, trying to discern what remedy or diet or program might actually make them feel not just alive, but well. People are sick, I guess. Such individual experimentation is not the same thing as the scientific method. It lacks the proving tests of replication and consensus, but the two approaches are more closely related than today's apostles of scientism often suggest. They proceed from the same intense curiosity, the same desire for understanding through experience. And personalized experimentation can be the only way to be empirical when your subject is the strange nexus of the self, like if you're sick and nobody's able to help you. Every human life is, in this essence, a science experiment. How we choose to react when our assumptions are tested defines the real scope of our curiosity. If you refuse any Food and Drug Administration, FDA blessed treatment for chronic illness because there's no controlled study proving that it works, or have a religious experience and preemptively dismiss it as an illusion without seeing what happens if you pray, you may be many things, but you are not really much of an empiricist. That's pretty strong. See, even these religious people, they need to talk about empiricism if they're going to try to defend their religious views of knowledge. Which is why, in many instances, the interest that Pinker dismisses as irrational, hugger-mugger, everything from astrology to spiritualism, have tended to strengthen during periods of real scientific ferment. It's why Isaac Newton loved alchemy, and the Victorians loved seances. It is why charismatic Christianity has spread very naturally with economic development in Africa and Latin America, and why the space age coincided with the spread of all these health food stores. See, he's come under attack because he wrote a column, which I don't have here. He's got some kind of chronic illness, this guy, Russ Dudat. He's got Lyme's disease, and he could never get it treated. So he claims he ordered in another column, he ordered some medical device that doesn't have any proof that it works. And he claims by using that medical device that uses some kind of vibration sound knowledge that it has given him relief from his chronic Lyme's disease. And nobody can explain why it works. There's no evidence that it works, but he says it works for him. And he's been looking for this cure for years and years. So please respond to the following statement. The scientific method is the primary route to collective social happiness. Do you strongly agree? Agree? Neutral cannot decide. Disagree? Strongly disagree. So let's go back to the share screen. And what did I do with that? Did I close it? Oh, no. Let me find it again here. Got to be careful about this because, all right, so we go here. And so we go share screen. Okay, there it is. So is the scientific method the primary route to collective social happiness? The scientific method. So that's his job, Russ Dudat's job as the conservative for New York Times, religious conservative, defending religion and religious belief in a world of secularism and science. He's claiming there's not a conflict between being empirical and being religious. Okay. All right. So back to what else do we have here? I covered the final exam already. That's good. Also, to give you more examples of how people do qualitative research and actually make money at it. Again, the New York Times is having this series on focus groups, and I want to highlight it here just to show you the kind of questions that this person who is paid to do this research uses in doing their research. So you can see here, I'm not going to go through the whole article. It's long. It's a few thousand words long, just to show you the kind of questions that this qualitative researcher is asking about women, to 12 women on gender roles today, like what it means to be a woman in America, because these are all Americans in 2022. So very simple questions. This is the person they're paying to do this. If you had to pick one word to describe how you are feeling these days, what would it be? What would that word be? Thinly spread, that's more than one word. Impatient, existing. She gives the background information, the demographic information. Autumn Sky is 36, white, community health coordinator from Nebraska. Brianna's 22, white, a teacher from Florida. Jahira, 26, is black, a social from New York. So existing, exhausted. And so you can see they've got all the text from their responses, and then this person, this qualitative researcher then asks, okay, we're going to do the same kind of word exercise where I throw out a phrase and then you return a word that comes to mind. The first is getting a job. And these people go on, blah, 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 blah. Dusty's got a lot to say about that. Then Kirsten Soltis Anderson says, all right, the next big life event or decision, becoming a parent. And this person goes blah, 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 blah. Okay. So again, ask very general but important questions to get them to talk without appearing to judge them or push them to answer in a particular way that I, the researcher, want them to answer. Kirsten Soltis Anderson, Brianna, what word comes to mind when I say becoming a parent? So Brianna's kind of shy because Brianna didn't speak. So Kirsten Soltis kind of encourages her to speak. Then Anderson asks, do you think there are differences in how men and women think about big life events or decisions? And Autumn Sky goes on and on and on. Julie goes on and on and on and on. So they're talking to each other, all together in one group, right? All 12 of them are get together in this focus group. So they're like talking to each other. While Kristen Soltis Anderson is recording this. And then, she encourages more. Kirsten Soltis Anderson, now tell us a little bit more about that. They go on some more, blah, 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 blah. Then Kirsten Soltis Anderson asks, how do you think through the decision about whether or not to become a mom? Kirsten Anderson then also asks, do you think that society has different expectations for moms versus dads? Do women have a harder time getting ahead in the workforce compared to men? A few years ago, the Me Too movement changed the conversation about how women are treated by men, and specifically in the workplace. What comes to mind when I say Me Too? Do you think that Me Too movement was a net positive for women in the workforce, or maybe not so much? So that's kind of specific. She's getting to the ends here. She's gotten them to a point where she can ask these kind of more controversial, provocative questions. I want to ask about the word feminist. Show of hands first. How many of you would say that you think the label feminist would apply to you, that you are comfortable saying, I am a feminist? And she got a lot of word out of it, a lot of comment from these people. So that's, again, another example of qualitative research involving focus groups. And then another one by a different researcher about people going back to work. So there's a lot of commentary about this issue, about people having to go back to the office after 2.5 years being allowed to work from home. Let's see if I can find this here. So I think you can see that. I'm not certain. Like that, stop share, go here, share screen. And so, close that. So, and this is the different researcher. So this is a big controversial topic. It's important to women because women feel like they're disadvantaged in their careers because they're typically tasked with the responsibility to take care of the kids. And then when they got the chance to work from home, it was a little bit easier for them because they didn't have to be away from the kids while also being at work because they're working from home during the pandemic. So now all these companies are trying to push people to come back to the office. Should they come back to the office 5 days a week like we used to? You know, you had to go to work Monday through Friday and you had to find daycare for your kids and you have to, or how is society really changed from the pandemic? That's an important question. Has the pandemic really changed how we the society's expectations regarding work-life balance as reflected in the desire for people to continue to work from home? And there's other issues because of the inflation and the rising price of gasoline, because of the world crises we're facing and climate change. Maybe it's a good thing if people don't have to spend energy and buy gasoline to drive their cars, you know, for an hour or 2 hours. I mean, it's probably an issue here in Seoul, but I was like amazed. I mean, I know people that work in Washington, D.C. and Washington, the United States, the capital, and these people, they commute 2 hours one way every day from their homes in Maryland and Virginia to get to their jobs in Washington, D.C. Wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to do that anymore, or we could reduce it? And so that's why this topic is coming up here, because particularly a lot of women they want to keep this option of not having to go into work every day because women are the ones that have the task of taking care of the kids. So, so how does she start off? What word or phrase, short phrase, would you use to describe your concerns about our country right now? And so Ryan sounds like he's a man. And then there's others, you know, it's all a mess, hopeless. Now fill in the blank. I feel blank about how things are going for me personally. And then you see the responses here. And then she asked the next question. People seem to feel, not everybody, more positive about themselves than they feel about the country overall. Tell me a bit about that, anybody? So these sound like very general questions, but there's a theoretical framework behind these questions. Marjorie, let's shift gears a little. How about this fill in the blank exercise? I feel blank about my job these days. Burned out, bored, overworked, optimistic, secure, nervous, empowered. Okay. So she says, oh, there's a mix of net positive and negative. Adam, you picked empowered. Tell me about that. Yeah, that's always interesting. You know, empowerment. We like empowerment in the social sciences. What about folks who said they feel burned out and frustrated? And then she goes on, have your views toward your career and kind of work that you do change during the pandemic? And then she asks, how do you feel since you've made that change? So some people have made changes. You know, there's some talk about this great resignation, people quitting their jobs to get better jobs. Other folks have had similar change in how they view their work or their career. Have you had other? And so she's trying to encourage them to speak. Has anybody else had the experience of wanting to be back in the office? I want to get a show of hands. How many people think they feel more productive when they're in the office? How many people feel that they have better communication with their colleagues when they're in the office? That's the claim. Supposedly people are more creative and more thoughtful and more productive if they're in the office, communicating with people face to face rather than through Zoom. How many people feel here have felt that they were thinking about, how many people here have felt like they were thinking about their returning to work plan through the lens of, is it safe for me to go back to work right now? How many people said that that was a concern for them? Could you still bring the virus home to your children or to your old people that are living with you? So the New York Times thinks it's important to get this kind of qualitative data, right? To go beyond the statistics, to get deeper. But we're running out of time now, and there's a class outside. So that's it for today, okay? Bye.